Alright, so you went out and shot some cool new footage. Nice work. Now you take it back to your studio. Super excited to check it out. You load it up. Play it back. But wait, something's not right. The motion has a weird staccato feel to it, and this isn't a zombie movie. The truth is, this happens all the time with smartphone footage, GoPro footage, really any footage from a camera shooting outside in bright conditions with no ND filter added. But don't worry, you can fix it by adding motion blur. It's a subtle trick, but it definitely helps footage shot like this look more cinematic. So before we get into the how, let's quickly talk about the why. Whatever frame rate you shoot, you double that to get the shutter speed for ideal looking motion blur. So when shooting a movie at 24 frames per second, you would typically want a 1/48 shutter speed. If it goes lower, then it can streak or almost smear. If it goes higher, then it looks choppy or staccato. And especially on an iPhone, since they have fixed apertures and use the shutter to adjust the exposure. So in very bright conditions, it will speed up the shutter to compensate and cause this unwanted staccato look. Now using an ND filter or a neutral density filter will remedy this while shooting. But if you don't have one, then that's where this tip comes into play. We used this technique recently ourselves on an iPhone shot short film called The Unicorn. We shot the entire film on a Moment tele lens, and currently there is no easy way to put an ND filter on that. Although they do have a filter ring releasing in the near future, which is great, but it didn't help us on this shoot. So we added motion blur in post-production. We used After Effects, but there are many ways to do this depending on your editing or visual effects software of choice. Now in After Effects, we use the pixel motion blur. There's a couple different ways to do it, but we thought this one looked best. And you can use manual or automatic settings, and we used manual, and we ended up using a 90-degree shutter angle. 180 is kind of the normal, but for this particular footage, we felt 90 looked the best. Look at her hand, you can see it changing there. So we have the shot without blur and then blur added. It's a subtle effect, but it makes your footage look more cinematic. Now in this shot we did the same thing. Look at the toy's face, the cowgirl's face. That's where you can really see. Wherever the motion is where you see the blur added. Now this shot there wasn't a whole lot of motion, but there was just enough to where adding motion blur helped. You can see it on and off there, and it's very subtle, but it just gives it a little more of a cinematic look. A 180-degree shutter is standard, but again, dial it in to taste. Now this shot's where she falls out of the tree, and it's a very fast shot. And adding the motion blur to it just gave it that extra little bit of finesse. Just gave it a little more cinematic motion. Now in some cases, that staccato look, that clean frame look is great. Action scenes, I mentioned zombie movies, fast motion, that kind of stuff, it can look kind of cool. But in traditionally shot stuff where you just want normal fluid cinematic motion, it's good to add it. Now this shot, you can really see it. We did a whip pan, and without it, you see a pretty clear frame. With it, you see the nice motion blur. You're also hiding a little bit of the rolling shutter with the motion blur. So if you find yourself shooting with no ND filter, which is pretty commonplace, oftentimes with the native camera app or even FiLMiC Pro or any type of app, you can add motion blur in post-production to make your smartphone films more cinematic. It's a subtle technique that almost tricks the eye, but it does make a difference. So unless you're shooting an action scene where you want that staccato feel, give this a try on your next production. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any of our future videos. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.